We also have a category called the Program Management Office, where we house all of the cross-organizational functions that will extend throughout the life of the program. We are currently in the program initiation phase, which includes the engineering work to support DWR's environmental planning. Next slide. So in this slide, you see we have the PMO office that's organized into 10 functional areas. And then in program initiation, we have 2 functional areas, the engineering and field work. And in the next set of slides, I'm going to highlight the budget items that we're requesting in each of those functional areas that are shown on this slide. Next slide. So the first functional area is the executive office. We're seeking funding for the executive office staff. That includes myself and our chief of staff and chief engineer. The office also includes our general counsel and financial functions such as treasury and auditing, and our human resources. The contingency for the program also sits within this category, which is the undefined allowance item you see at the bottom of the table. Next, Claudia. Our next category is community engagement. This budget supports our stakeholder engagement team. It conducts all of our outreach and communications with the various stakeholders interested in the program, supports our monthly stakeholder meetings, including the engineering work that goes into developing the presentations. The group also helps manage our website and social media content, which we hope to keep fresh and updated routinely so that the sites and the social media areas don't get stale. Next. Program controls budget includes the staff that provide our core program control functions along the lines of cost, schedule, risk, and document management. And then under program governance, that's the continued development, maintenance, editing, and of our policies and procedures for the way that we execute the program. Next. This is our administration budget within the PMO. It includes all of the costs associated with our physical space, such as rent, utilities, and supplies. We also have our IT group rolling up to administration, and that includes all of our IT services that help support us with our hardware and software. And we also do our IT development, software selection, implementation, and rollout through the IT group in administration. Property and permitting, we've budgeted staff to help us secure the temporary entrance permits needed for our field investigation program that we hope to launch this year, as well as the cost of the TEPs that would go to the affected landowners. And the permitting management group is staff that liaison with our engineering team, as well as between our team and the DWR's environmental team that Carrie leads, to ensure that the work that we are doing is consistent with what Carrie and her team need to do their CEQA work largely. Next. There's 4 additional PMO functions that we're seeking a nominal amount of funding for: procurement, health and safety, quality management, and sustainability. These budgets will allow us to finalize our management plans in these areas and begin to develop our systems and tools for implementation before we move into the execution phase of the program. We don't anticipate doing a significant amount of procurement for the upcoming year. Most of the work is already under contract with existing vendors in the current fiscal year. Next. So we move into the program initiation phase, which is where we house and roll up all of our technical work. For the engineering work, that's largely going to be focused on completing the engineering plans for all of the alternatives identified by DWR as part of the planning process. Right now, we're working on 2 alternatives, the central and east alignment, and more alternatives may evolve as DWR completes their scoping efforts. Field work is our last category. We've got a significant amount of money budgeted for our long delayed field work. This is largely focused on our geotechnical exploration program. We plan to use the budget for about 55 land-based borings and 8 overwater borings, and incorporate that data into our three-dimensional underground conditions model that helps continue to feed the engineering design evolution. We'll also need some nominal surveying work to help support locating activities in the field investigation work. Next slide. So this slide includes a list of all of the vendors with allocated funding in our budget over $300,000, and that represents about 97% of our budget. And there's 13 vendors on this list with expected task orders or contracts over 300,000. The top contract vendors will be Jacobs, who's leading our engineering work and managing our field work. Fugro is our geotechnical firm and is doing the bulk of the field work. And then Parsons is our program management firm, providing a lot of the staff that do our core program controls and other support positions. Next slide. And here's a roll-up summary of each of those line items. Approximately just under 13 million for the program management office, which again is the support functions that go across all areas of the program, and a little over 21 million our program initiation phase, adding up to a total of 34 million for next year. And I'm glad to take any questions you might have.
Questions? Mr. Atwater?
Just got to unmute.
I'm fine with it.
Director Palmer?
Okay.
Director Floyd?
No, it looks good to me also.
Okay, great. I'll entertain a motion for approval then.
I'll make that motion. This is Director Blois.
Director Blois, motion is a second.
Director Palmer, second.
Director Palmer seconds it. Roll call, please.
Director Stamera.
Aye.
Director Atwater.
Aye.
Director Blois.
Aye.
Director Palmer.
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it.
Great, thank you. We'll move then right along to 7C, Introduction to DCA Program Controls.
So I'd like to introduce Waleed to you all. I don't know that you have met him yet, but he is our program controls manager, and he's going to give you an introduction to the work that they do in that group. So Waleed, you want to kick off?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Directors, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Maybe I will start with a brief introduction about myself. My name is Waleed Abu Kadra, and I am the manager of the Program Controls Group. About the experience, I have 17 years of program controls experience, and actually my educational background, I have a bachelor degree in civil engineering, and I have recently completed my PhD in April of this year. I started with DCA in January of this year. I'm really excited about joining this organization and to contribute to this critical infrastructure project for the state of California. Next slide, please. About the agenda today, I would like to introduce you to the team, to the program controls team, and to highlight some of the initiatives that you have worked on this year, and to introduce you to our new program management information system that will go live with our phase 2 business process implementation in July of this year. Next slide, please. This slide actually to show you the organizational structure of our current team, the program controls team. We have 6 team members that cover cost, schedule, risk, and document management. Those are really the core functions of program controls. As the program grow, the staff will be added as appropriate to support the program organization. Next slide, please. This list is actually about the key achievements for this year. This is the 7 key achievements. So the first one, we have built our organization, and we meet weekly to ensure that we are on top of all our work, resolve issues, and discuss ways to improve our business processes. So regardless, despite the current situation, but we are still meeting weekly to discuss any issues that might come up. Our group actually leads the development of this annual budget preparation through meeting with the program leads to help them to develop their budget within our new work breakdown structure, the WBS that Catherine referred to. And the other thing that we have actually spent a considerable amount of time streamlining the invoice processes, focus on automating the workflow, the status update and targeting review times, and the standardization of invoice submittal, and actually to make the invoices paid quicker. And we focus on that because that's really a key performance, and we made this as a key performance indicator for our growth. The other main thing that we focus on, or the key achievement this year, we have completed our phase 2 of eBuilder implementation, and we'll speak in more details about that in the upcoming slides. Focus more on the eBuilder. We have launched our risk management program and initiated the bi-weekly risk workshops with the team to identify our risk engineering risks and risk mitigation measures. And we actually launched our document management system in SharePoint. Next slide, please. So this slide, I'm going to spend the remainder of this presentation to discuss the implementation of eBuilder as our program management information system. In implementing that system, we followed 6 main steps for this implementation of our phase 2. Step 1, we started with the identification of what business processes would be best benefit for the automation of the workflows and database management for data collection and reporting. In phase 2 and 3, we identified we developed our desired workflows and data collection requirement and for the identified business processes. And then we started the configuration, then configured these processes. Sorry. We configured those processes and data forms into eBuilder system. And in parallel, we actually documented all the plans, summarized these processes, and we are currently in the training and rollout step for phase 2 implementation which will take place by end of June and in July. Next slide, please. No, the previous slide, sorry, is Claudia. Okay, this slide will provide you with the list of the main business process that we have selected for this phase 2 implementation. There are 15 business processes. And the processes mainly focus on budget management, contract management, procurement, community engagement, resource management, and schedule management. Those are the most critical activities in program controls, and that's how we identified those business processes. Next slide, please. So this slide shows you actually an example of the business process workflow and how it is actually developed. So this is the invoice processing, and this is included in a description of each of the steps in the process. And on the left-hand side, it will show in the swim lane, it shows the responsible party for each activity. So that's just to give you a sample of the workflows. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows you, this is actually associated with step 3 and 4 that we have discussed above. This is a typical eBuilder form to capture the data collection requirement that were identified when we developed our business requirement. And this form will be completed by the users, then forwarded to the next step. So this is the actual form that the users in eBuilder will see to complete the required information and data so we can process that in the system. Next slide, please. So in order to configure the workflows, the design workflows in eBuilder, instead of using this computer coding to configure the process, actually we have relied heavily on these workflows for software configuration. So that's how the process would look like in eBuilder. That's how we configured the design workflow in eBuilder. So this is sample of eBuilder flow, and this is associated with step 4 that we have discussed about. Next slide, please. Then about the documentation of the list of the management plan, that we have documented all the processes and we completed these plans to be part of the eBuilder. And we will be finalizing those plans in the next months, and ultimately they will form a key component of our overall program management plan. So those are the plans: the budget management plan, cost management plan, construction, change, procurement, risk management, schedule management, and document management. Next slide, please. Here, just to give you, I will focus the next few slides, will focus really to give you a flavor about the eBuilder software and the interface. So we'll start here with will be the login page. So next slide. Once we log into the system, you can navigate to your own custom configured home screen that help you to keep track of all the workflows that in progress and highlight what actions are sitting in your queue. So if you see in the upper table here, it shows what actions are currently in the court and in your court, and which is in my court in this case, and just to be required to take an action and clear them. And the bottom, the one in the bottom here, the table, it shows you depending, like in this case, depending invoices or the open invoices. So this is a kind of like an example of the landing page. Next slide, please. Again, this is like an example of the customized dashboard for quickly access performance. Again, it's a set of identified criteria, and this is a sample of to show you the like the invoicing statistics. And this is just to give you a feeling about how this is a type of dashboard that our payment team might configure for their use. And next slide, please. And of course, the main key benefit of automating all those workflows in eBuilder is the ability to conduct the data queries and to create all these reports for performance monitoring in a matter of just pressing a button and just creating all these reports. So this is an example of an invoice status report that can be configured in eBuilder system to help to monitor how quickly we're really processing invoices and to identify any issues with any of the invoices. Next slide, please. Okay, that's all, and I'll be more than happy to take any question.
Thank you, Walid. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Director Palmer.
Maybe life has gotten past this, but I've sometimes noticed that even with the best information technology, sometimes there are little glitches. Is there going to be some kind of an auditing of this occasionally to see if, like when you generate all these forms, that everything is indeed done correctly? I mean, are you going to like take occasional samples and make sure that something weird hasn't popped up in the wrong box?
Definitely, that will be part of our process, that we are going to conduct this check and the QC regularly to make sure that everything is recorded correctly and the process works efficiently.
Okay, yeah, because I love the fact that it does all this. It's kind of like, you know, when you do your taxes and stuff, but nonetheless, things can happen. And
yeah, definitely. Sometimes it's things that data is not entered correctly and steps didn't record it correctly or saved. So this is something will be from our regular process to make sure that the system is correct and up to date.
And Sarah, another safeguard is DWR getting the invoices and making the payment and checking it. And then Metropolitan is our treasurer right now. So they'll see the documents. And then, of course, we have an annual audit that looks at all of our commitments and expenditures against commitments. So we've got lots of layers of oversight there.
Good, yeah.
Plus you guys.
So I do have a question. Walid, this is really good stuff. It's an incredibly fancy, incredibly robust software system.
Yeah.
But even the best software system takes people to run it. You mentioned that you've managed so far to reduce your invoice turnaround time by 35 days, I believe you said. How long does it take to pay a vendor from the date he submits an invoice to the day he gets a check?
This is actually the average. The average days is 35 days from end to end. So this is from where they submit till we actually process, get it paid.
Wow, that's pretty good considering all the hoops that have to be jumped through.
Yeah, we have spent too much, actually a lot of time just to streamline that, and with coordination, of course, with DWR, and we streamed that through the electronic submission and everything, which saved a lot of time.
Does DWR have people that are participating in the management of this software system?
Yes, they started to use it. Yes, so DCO, they review it in the system.
Thank you.
So then we have a good integration between the DWR and the DCA folks then.
Yes, on the system, yes, but there is a point where they process that to accounting through the SAB and Fiscal. So this is a separate process. But yes, reviewing and submission from DCA to DCO, that's in the system.
Yeah, we haven't integrated our e-builder with their financial system. They'll at some point take it out of our system so that they can process it within theirs. Same with Metropolitan.
Right.
Great. Any further questions? Okay, well, thank you.
President, I was wondering if we could just confirm there isn't a request for public comment on
Oh,
this.
sure. Sure. Is there any public comment, Claudia?
Not for this particular item.
Okay. All right, then we'll move right along to our June DCA monthly report.
All right, you guys have a copy of the monthly report. It's expenditure in this last was parallel to our forecast, and the data is consistent with last month. No new budget changes or commitments in the report, and we're still forecasting completing the fiscal year at around 36.5 million. Glad to take any questions.
Any questions?
No, I don't. It looks good.
Any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, we'll go right along then to E, the Stakeholder Engagement Committee update.
Hi, everyone. How are you?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you all. Since last we spoke, we had our May meeting. Every time we think the meetings are somehow going to end up being shorter, we are very wrong. This meeting was particularly sort of, we had a really great report from our traffic expert, Don Hubbard, who went through preliminary traffic studies and gave a really comprehensive report about traffic, logistics improvements, and what's being done and how DCA is incorporating our feedback. This next week, our meeting is on Wednesday at 3 p.m. We will be looking further into how DCA is incorporating SEC feedback, and we'll be spending some time actually going through getting an update on tribal government relationships, just because that's something that's been coming up a lot, as well as probably spending the majority of time looking at the RTM, the tunnel soils, and discussing that. We got great feedback on the presentation, both from the board end as well as from SEC. So without taking up too much time, I wanted to introduce our SEC members who will be reporting out. Joining us today are Anna Swenson, who is our Yolo County at-large representative, Sean Worth, who works with us on as a terrestrial animal expert, mostly on Save the Cranes and crane expert, as well as Mr. Gilbert Cosio, who is an ex officio member, who we actually asked to present specifically today just because he's done so much work around traffic, and we thought it'd be great to get his feedback on the last meeting as well. So Sean, Anna, and Gilbert, I'm not sure which order you decided. I don't know if you're drawing straws, but I will leave it to you to start and then to pass the proverbial mic to one another. Thank you.
Thanks. Before you start, I'll just take a second to thank each and every one of you for coming by this afternoon and share with us. So thank you. And as Nasli says, you go ahead and start. Let us know who starts, and we'll keep track of you.
This is Sean. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I either got the short straw or the long straw, I'm not sure. I'm on the SEC addressing terrestrial species concerns. I'm the conservation chair for the Motherlode chapter of the Sierra Club, which comprises 24 Northern California counties. I'm on the executive committee of the Environmental Council of Sacramento, ECOS, and a co-chair of their Habitat Committee, Habitat 2020. I was a founding member of Save Our Sandhill Cranes, and I'm a consultant for the Friends of the Stone Lakes National Wildlife Refuge. I was involved with the terrestrial species stakeholder group for the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, and I was involved in the California Water Fix hearings and provided comments focused on biological resources for the environmental documents for the various prior iterations of this project. I want to provide a quick note about where we find this project in the history of our nation. I was one of the SEC members who expressed concerns about charging ahead with the SEC process during the COVID-19 pandemic. I was and continue to be worried that many of the important voices that need to be heard in the Delta through representatives on the SEC have been silenced during the pandemic because of technology gaps or technical communication limitations due to being poor or disenfranchised. I fear that the decision to charge ahead or be left behind drew yet again another red line. This outcome reinforces how entrenched and systemic racism is in our modern day society in the United States, how even decisions that appear to have nothing to do with race end up perpetuating fundamental inequities in favor of the status quo. If we hope to quell the justified anger boiling in the streets, we need to treat everyone fairly and allow silent voices to be heard. If this means we need to pause and reevaluate or slow down the sprint to the finish line, it is the least that should be expected of us as we review and provide feedback on a huge project that has a very real potential to disproportionately affect those that have been left without a voice once again. So moving to my area of expertise, could we pull up the North-South Haul Roads map? There we go. So I would start by saying how disappointed the environmental community was to see the exact same options for the intakes as was in the California Water Fix. Their placement immediately to the west of the Stone Lakes National Wildlife Refuge continues to be very concerning, as the species that rely on the refuge are already very constrained by urbanization both to the north and to the south. Concerns that sandhill crane roosting sites, including North Stone Lakes, could be abandoned due to construction disturbance effects remains. Similarly, the proposed new haul roads would bisect land in the Stone Lakes National Wildlife Refuge and will be very destructive and disruptive to migratory waterfowl and other wildlife. Some of these haul road alternatives were proposed in order to minimize truck traffic on the river road and the resultant impacts on the communities along the river road. In the context of disruption to humans and wildlife, it would be helpful if the extent of truck traffic on key rural roads, like Hood, Franklin, Lambert, and the haul roads could be explained more completely than just in terms of level of service, as was done at the last meeting. A bar graph for each road segment based on histograms of the number of trucks per hour over the course of a day for peak and median truck volumes would be very instructive. As for the north-south haul roads, constructing a new haul road farther to the south, farther to the west would be a good alternative. At least then it would direct flushing birds and other wildlife species into the refuge rather than away from it. And it's important to understand that for these north-south haul roads, even infrequent traffic is going to result in birds being flushed and possible transmission strikes. Another alternative that should be considered would be to route the trucks on a new north-south haul road only after most of the migratory waterfowl have departed or before they arrive. In other words, from spring to early fall. If there was an urgent need to move things to and from the intakes in the winter, trucks could use the river road. And given the great inconvenience this would create for locals, such usage only be for emergencies, which means that timing peak construction during the summer months would be a good idea and would help reduce negative effects to both wildlife and local communities. The issue of truck traffic need not be framed as a choice between impacts on local communities versus impacts on wildlife. We can try to address both of them completely. Can we pull up the next map, which is the Brack Trap map?
Mhm.
So this is from the eastern alignment. Moving the maintenance shaft depicted here near the Woodbridge Ecological Reserve to the north of Peltier Road would fit within the lane constraints for distance between access shafts and also greatly reduce the negative effects to the very important roost sites in the north and south units of the reserve for sandhill cranes. Those are two of the most popular places for the public to go and enjoy the cranes. Sandhill cranes forage extensively within a 1 mile radius of the roost sites. and it's important to avoid disturbances within that radius, especially for significant sites like those of the north and south units at the reserve. Catherine Mallon has been very receptive to our input regarding design and site changes that will be less harmful to terrestrial species, and has indicated there will be some changes suggested to address this concern at the next meeting, and we thank her for that. I will continue to carefully review engineering design and placement and provide relevant feedback to hopefully reduce negative impacts to terrestrial species going forward. Thank you for your time.
Sean? Any questions of Sean? Okay, we'll move right along. There may be some later. Next. Gilbert next, Anna.
So thank you. My name is Anna Swenson, and I think I should have gone first because Sean, you have great credentials. Wow. So my name is Anna Swenson. I represent Yolo County at large. I am a resident of Clarksburg. I joke that I speak farmer. That's my special gift or special talent out here. I specialize in community outreach, and I really am very passionate about making sure that any project that goes into the Delta has the full consideration of all of the aspects of this community and the various communities throughout the Delta. And it's complex, and it sometimes is difficult, but it's very, very important because this estuary is not something that can be taken lightly. It can't be recreated, and it is absolutely one of the most beautiful places I've ever laid eyes on. I live in a very, very small community. There's about 278 of us. Whenever someone calls 911, the fire alarm goes off, and we all hear it. We all know that our local volunteer fire department is going to go help a fellow neighbor or friend. We have very small schools. Our graduating class this year, I believe, was 58 students. A lot of our focus in our schools is on agriculture and on nature and on the environment. So we're trying very hard to be good stewards to the next generation and make sure that they understand the importance of the connection between agriculture and nature. Our communities are very close. We, despite the distance across the river, we are very close with our fellow communities such as Hood and Walnut Grove and Locke and Isleton and Rio Vista. These are all places, and Freeport, these are all places that are, despite being very close geographically, they are very unique, they are very special, and especially the town of Locke is a place that you never would be able to find anyplace else, and it is remarkable, it is amazing, and the Delta is very unique because it's a genuine opportunity to walk back through history without having it be made for you artificially. This was the start of the gold rush. They went past us in the Sacramento River back in the 1800s, and there's very much a sense of history here. The people that live here are very important. They very much care for the land. They very much care for the rivers. They are very good stewards of the land and have a vested interest because this is a multi-generational area. These farmers have been farming out here. One farming family I know is on its 8th or 9th generation. A grandbaby was just born. And that is a beautiful thing that cannot be duplicated or recreated, even artificially, in any other place. And so I really appreciate you allowing me to come today to speak with you. I take my responsibility and my role on the DCA Stakeholder Engagement Committee very seriously. I went into it very much taking off the time that it was needed to do outreach. And I was actually really excited at an opportunity because this is my third go around with a project in the Delta. I participated with the EDCP. I also participated with the Water Fix, and now a very similar project with this one. And so I felt great honor, and I felt that it was a great opportunity to reach out to my fellow neighbors and make sure that they actually understood what the project was. I have learned so much from this process. The staff has been really wonderful. They have provided materials really fast. I have gotten countless zipped or flash drives from them and copies of maps, and it's just that, and even through COVID, the delivery guy knows my name because they've been so effective at sending me stuff, and I really, really appreciate that, because what little outreach I can do, it's really nice to have it be quick and effective. I'd also like to recognize Santa Clara. So when COVID first started happening, I was watching the news, and I was really taken aback, and I got emotional at how effective Santa Clara stepped up to protect its people and provided housing and was using innovation and technology and all of the things that were needed at that call for help to help their fellow community members. And I just want to acknowledge, Santa Clara really, I didn't have a lot of experience with it, and that experience of watching the news and watching your civic leaders do the right thing was very refreshing, and I just want to acknowledge that. So we've talked about nature. Clarksburg and the Delta region is one of the places where you can actually reach clean air, even though we're in very close proximity to the state capitol. We have tiny little Delta schools. We have lots of farmers that are growing the food for California, which is wonderful and is a great experience for anybody that comes down here to make that connection between where your food grows and where it arrives in the grocery store. Stone Lakes is one of our most magnificent jewels of the Delta. It is a refuge that spans a large distance between the river and where population meets. It's a beautiful, gorgeous place. If you've never been to Stone Lake, I highly recommend that you will take an opportunity to walk around and think about how amazing it is that people were able to protect that much land and protect the birds and protect the wildlife. So when I think of this project, unfortunately, I think of Owens Valley. For some reason, that's just the first thing that comes to my mind. I also think about who's going to pay for this. I worry about ratepayers. I worry about people who already are financially struggling, and the idea of their water rates going up or water districts being, having to pay more money. It worries me that it's going to put more of an economic stress on folks that already have an economic stress. This process has been better than the BDC or the water fix, much more transparent. We've received maps that we've never seen before. We've received information we've never seen before. It is very refreshing, and I want to acknowledge you that I recognize that, and that it has been a good impression on me that at the very least we are allowed to see maps and plans and at least mock-ups of what the intention of this project is. So my problem with this process, of course, is that it will destroy the communities that have been here since the 1800s. Clarksburg is directly across from Intake 2. We haven't talked a lot yet, although I'm sure that we will talk about the impacts, because the way these Delta communities exist is, and actually the entire Delta is a system. So anything that you do to one side will directly affect another side. So we are across the river from where Intake 2 will be. And we haven't talked a lot about the impacts on this side, although we know from the previous renditions that there will be impacts to our community. We worry about air quality. We worry about water quality with our domestic wells. We worry about noise. Noise is a big thing. And then, finally, it's going to be very difficult to watch one of the most beautiful estuaries in the Western United States turn into an industrial water complex with tall shafts that are going to be 42 feet in the air in the middle of an island. And knowing that we've lost prime farmland, that a family has now, in whatever means, has now been removed from that land and they won't be able to farm there anymore. That's one of the hardest parts of this process, is I always have to think back, I find myself taking lots of pictures because I worry that one day it won't look like that anymore. And then instead it'll look like the Freeport intake, which is very cement and industrial and felt foreign and alien to what we have here now. I've had some frustrations through this process. We spent a lot of time talking about RTM, or recycled tunnel material. Out here, we call it tunnel muck. We spent a lot of time talking about possible reuses for it and ways that maybe it could benefit the community. And then a report comes out, a report that they had at that time but hadn't been released to us yet. Turns out that, engineers say don't count on RTM or tunnel muck to be a benefit. It actually can be a burden, which is what we knew because it has been analyzed in the different renditions of this project. And it just felt disingenuous. It felt like I was spending a lot of time researching and connecting with my community members on a topic that their own engineers knew wasn't probable, wasn't really something that we should focus on, wasn't something that is going to be a benefit. If anything, that conversation should have been, how can we compensate people for the amount of tunnel muck that's going to end up on their property? And that was really frustrating because every single meeting I spend a lot of time preparing for it because I feel a civic duty to do my best and to be prepared for these meetings. And so I felt like we kind of got the runaround on that one. What else? The mutual benefit. So constantly throughout these meetings, they want us to try to identify mutual benefits that could be created out of the tunnel project. I don't actually think that there's any benefit that ever could even begin to compensate the communities for which they're going to lose. I don't think that you could come up with a financial amount or a improvement to a road or an improvement to anything, even internet, which is one of our biggest issues out here. I don't think that the people of the Delta would trade that for this project because of the amount of, the level of devastation. It's absolute devastation. Hood is one of the towns that will be absolutely devastated and inoperable. And the people there will not be able to live there anymore if this project goes through. And I just don't know how you come up with an idea or a number or a whatever when you know that those people have lived in those homes on those properties for generations. It's very difficult. And I find myself just circling around that question and never really being able to come up with an answer. COVID has complicated this whole thing. COVID has we were on a great streak, and I was having a lot of meetings and attending a lot of reclamation meetings and really getting out there in the community and getting a good groove, and then COVID hit. And due to the issues in the Delta with conductivity and broadband, it is very difficult to communicate. It's very difficult for our community members to even connect to these meetings to see them, which is why I asked for stuff on flash drives so that they can take it home and, look at it on their personal computers. And so basically I've been disabled. What little outreach I do and respond effectively and immediately, but unfortunately it's the nature of what's happened. And so I was a little bit disappointed. One, to be represented that I felt in favor of going forward because I felt very concerned about going forward and leaving out huge populations of the people that will be directly affected by this project. And two, it didn't feel essential. This is a project that's going to be built when my daughter is nearly 40 and she just turned 14. So it didn't feel essential for the time that we're in right now, right? But I've hung on because what little I can do, I hope that I can have my voice heard, and I also hope that whatever recommendations that I can make could be helpful. I do not like to, and I will not make recommendations of, have the Hall Road go on, the Van Lovensel's land versus Wilson's land, those type of things. There's no way to make that decision. It's not equitable. It shouldn't go on either one of their lands. They shouldn't lose land to this project, and we should figure it out. I'm very concerned about traffic through Stones Lake. As I said, it is our jewel. We've done a good job. We've, really tried hard to provide a refuge for these critical bird species that otherwise would not have roosting areas. And the idea of driving truck traffic, whether or not it's on pavement or on a dirt haul road next to it, it's not right. You should not drive a construction project through a refuge at all. That's my opinion. The Delta Protection Commission, one of the things I want to make sure you guys are aware of is the Delta Protection Commission did a great thing last year, and they got us a designation as a heritage area. And this is amazing. This is something that the Delta has been hoping for. This is something that the Delta needed. This is something that would provide infrastructure and possibly funding and protections for our Delta. And I'm very afraid that this project is working in a silo fashion versus in a cooperative fashion with the plans for the Delta Protection Commission. And so I really encourage you guys to work together. The Delta Protection Commission is an expert on the Delta, and I believe that their opinions and their recommendations should be held in high regard because they've really earned it. They've earned the respect of the people in the Delta, and they've earned it, but with the amount of time and effort they've done studying the Delta. I think that's about it. I really appreciate this opportunity. I really do. I would like to see alternatives, not alternatives to plans or alternatives for where roads should go or alternatives for our sightings for intakes or retrieval shafts. What I would like to see is for Santa Clara to do what it did in response to COVID. And I would like Santa Clara to figure out an innovative way that does not destroy this estuary, but provides the water that people need. This is not an issue of whether or not we want to share the water. This is an issue of, imagine if we came to your city and we decided that you had to move and we had to put in some infrastructure for the greater good, you would be on a different side of this coin. And so I greatly encourage you. You have the strength, you have the wherewithal and the technology to make those things happen. And I thoroughly believe in you. And what I would like to see are alternatives, not alternatives to different plans for parts of the tunnel, but actually alternatives to what we could do instead of the tunnel that wouldn't cost our taxpayers, that wouldn't raise the rate, that wouldn't destroy this estuary. And finally, I would thoroughly encourage you, please come to the Delta. Please come and look at Stone Lake. Things are slowly opening up. If nothing else, have a car ride through the Delta and enjoy its natural beauty. And I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna. Gilbert?
I just wanted to thank you for having me today. Anna and Sean and I exchanged emails over the last couple of days trying to figure out who was going to talk first. And I kind of pushed them both into talking before me because I wanted you guys to see the passion that's out there. You know, these people on the SCC are very passionate, and I have to applaud them and your staff because it's a tough situation to talk about something that we may not agree on, but we got to talk about it. So I appreciate the way your staffs handle it. And like I said, I wanted them to talk first because of how passionate they are. I'm passionate too, but I'm an engineer, so maybe that doesn't come out a little too dry. But certainly among our staff, I try to instill in them what it means to work for Delta clients, because we're a client-oriented business, and that's kind of the key. Is that if we've got to gain the trust and support of our clients and understand where they're coming from to work for them, and we've been very successful at it. I've been doing it for over 36 years, and our company's been doing it for about 60 years. So I wanted to introduce myself to those of you that don't know me. My name is Gilbert Cosio. I'm with MBK Engineers. I've been working in the Delta for, like I said, over 36 and a half years. I guess officially I'm the ex officio member of the SEC representing flood control interests. And I think that sounds like a kind of very specific title, but in reality, these flood control interests pretty much cover the gamut of all the SEC members, because the flood control agencies are run by trustees who are landowners, they're boaters, they're hunters, they're business owners, and they've been residents, like Anna said, for generations. In fact, to help our staff understand the passion that's out there in the Delta, last summer, I had Dennis Leary come and talk to our staff. Dennis's father settled on Grand Island right after the Civil War. And he was one of the first pear farmers in the Delta. So the legacy of the Learys continues as they're still farming pears out there. But just to listen to Dennis talk was really impressive to our staff. And then afterwards, he was practically in tears being able to share his story, because it's been such a huge thing in the life of the Leary family, as it has the Van Lobensells and the Herringers. And if you ever get a chance to hear one of those older families describe what it's been like in the Delta for 150 years, essentially, I encourage you to do that. I know the SEC has a lot of experienced people, but nothing is like listening to Steve Herringer explain his great-grandfather and grandfather and all the legacy that they've left over the last 100+ years. So anyway, back to my background. We represent 33 reclamation districts in the Delta, which is about 40%. In addition to those 33, I've probably worked for 10 or 12 others. So I personally have worked for about 50% of the entire Delta. Being a district engineer is a very small fraternity. We represent about 40%. A firm in Stockton, KSN, represents about 40%. So between our two firms, and we've both been doing this for over 60 years, there are very few people out there that have the experience we have in seeing what happens to these levees and flood control features. Like I said, our reclamation districts are landowners mostly, but also we work for the North Delta Water Agency. A lot of the same people, but they're more involved in the water quality and water supply. They have a state water project contract themselves. And we also work for a lot of individual landowners, either helping them with the regulatory aspects or water rights type stuff. So we're out there quite a bit, our whole staff here in our office. And so as far as our stakeholders, like I said, they've been around for a long time. And like Anna said, this is her third go around with this canal tunnel thing. Well, my clients and even myself to a certain extent have been through this many, many times. And during some times it's been very cordial, collaborative, trusting. And obviously the last 3 times, like Anna pointed to, probably not as collaborative or trusting, which is too bad, because early on when the State Water Project came online in the 70s, they knew the levees had issues for over 70 years. And they knew that building a project that would impact the Delta needed to be communicated well with the Delta community. So I know, looking through files of some of the barriers, the drought barriers they're proposing in the 70s, there was a lot of collaboration. They knew that they needed to do it for State Water Project quality, yet they knew they were going to be imposing something major on the Delta. And so in our files, we have a lot of meeting notes where things were presented and discussed, and they kind of came to some sort of agreement on where the barriers would be placed. And then if you look at what happened in the 2015 barriers, it's a little bit different. We were thrown a map saying, here's what we're doing. We tried to get background and talk about why barriers are here and not there. And it was very difficult. And this is kind of a sign of the times. And so my clients have gone through a lot over the years. Most of them are my age or older. And so they grew up seeing the federal flood control project turned over to their parents, and seeing the State Water Project, implemented from the 60s through the 70s. And so they've been around a long time. And so some of the information that I take back to them from the SEC is taken a little bit differently, because they've been there, done that. And so I think some stakeholders, maybe they would go back to their stakeholder group or some committee members, and I think they'd be providing better and newer information to their people. In my case, I try to present something and then I get questions back. Well, why not this? Why not that? And that's what makes it a little bit difficult, because they understand that this is kind of a conceptual design. I mean, some people have called it engineering, and we're getting towards engineering, but we're really not there yet. It really is more conceptual. And so my clients are really looking for the impacts. And I know we've talked about the fact that impacts are not part of what we're doing, but that's really the gist of some of the concerns. I mean, we're talking about citing some of the features right now, and certainly there are impacts in just the groundwork that we're talking about, but there are other impacts. I'll give you an example. Looking at the footprint for the pumping plants, and specifically pumping plant, I think site 5, which is the downstream most, you know, we know that it's going to destroy a certain ranch there. If you look at that ranch, if you drive out there, you realize that the farmer out there has probably invested, I'd say, in upwards of $20,000 per acre in the last couple of years, leveling the land and planting a vineyard. It's kind of two different ranches that are connected, and the pumping plant, or the diversion point, number 5, is going to essentially cut off their water supply. Now, the ranch is going to be destroyed. That's just what's going to happen. The other ranch won't have a water supply, so somehow that's going to have to be evaluated as far as impacts, what it's going to take to get those guys water. And then also, these lands are all connected by drainage. And when you start putting big features right in the middle of ranches, it's going to affect the drainage and how these guys have an ability to farm. And then also, like I said, my clients have gone through this before, and through WaterFix, you know, by the time we got to the hearings, there was a lot of information on analysis for flood control impacts and water quality impacts and that sort of thing. And that's what really is going to affect my clients. And the question I keep getting from them is, why are they separating out construction of one feature of a much bigger issue? And again, it goes back to how my clients are spread out as hunters and farmers and everything else. When they look at the Delta, they look at the entire package. And so to them, the State Water Project, if you're going to include tunnels, includes the levees, Old Middle River, all those levees that get water south now, because it will be a dual system. And so the question is, why are they spending so much on tunnels we won't see for 20 or 30 years, while we know we could use some money on levees? And I know that you guys have been supplied information that shows that some of the work we're doing as far as building tow berms is actually pretty substantial, and it's been very effective in stabilizing the levees for static stability and for dynamic stability during an earthquake. So that's one of the questions I get quite a bit, is why are we not looking at the water quality and the water transmission and everything else that goes with the State Water Project? I mean, I understand why it's been broken out, but it's hard for them to kind of digest that, because it just isn't the system to them. This is one component, and it doesn't really tell the whole story. The last thing I want to close with is just some background that I have. Like I said, I've been doing this 36 and a half years. For the first 15 years, I got to work with my mentor, a man named John Wright. John worked on levees for 30 or 35 years with the state. He started with the state right after World War II. He was a World War II veteran. When he retired from the state in the late 70s, he was the executive director of the what's now called the Flood Protection Board. It was Reclamation Board then. And then when he retired, he came over to work for us. And I spent 15 years, the last 15 years of John's life, picking his brain about what's happening out here, because these levees and lands do not react as you'd find them in an engineering textbook. And that's hard to describe when projects like yours come around. And I hear the same thing, and I've heard a little bit through the SEC, but not as much as during the WaterFix hearings, where I ask a question or bring up an issue, and the response is, we'll deal with that when we do the actual design. We've got to get data and do that. And there's actually a lot of design out there. There's design through knowledge. If you go to the Corps of Engineers, there are a lot of people there at the Corps that seem to know a lot more about these levees than some of the DWR people. I don't know why. I don't know if they just have a better system of historical preservation, whatever it is, but they have a very good feel for how these levees react. And as I've talked to geotechnical engineers in the past, it takes a while to convince them, and you almost have to see what happens. I recall a few years ago, the city of Stockton was putting in an intake facility on one of our islands, and they needed to run a pipeline through this island and over to North Stockton. And we told them it was going to have issues, and they didn't believe us. It took us about 5 years to work out an encroachment agreement, and we finally got one that we could live with. And sure enough, all those issues that we mentioned happened. And then one of the problems they had, which is hard for people to understand, is that the elevations in the Delta, both levee and ground elevations, most of the ground elevations, can vary with the tides. during this water supply project that the city of Stockton was putting in, the pipeline was being laid out, and they had a series of temporary benchmarks. They could survey in the pipeline at the exact elevation they wanted. And every time they'd come back to these temporary benchmarks, there were different elevations, and they kind of complained at first. They thought some of the landowners were messing with the benchmarks, but then as they started monitoring them, they realized they do. With the tide, they go up and down. And this is an area that's not that peaty, and so it's the entire stratum of soils under these levees and on these properties is very expansive somehow. And that's why I'm concerned that the dewatering around the pumping plant intakes and whatnot are not only going to damage the ground permanently, but that will damage the levees. And some of these levees have some oddities with them that even I don't understand. I have to respect them because I can see it in the data. And just recently, we put together some data from LiDAR that was shot in 2007 and LiDAR that was shot in 2017, so 10 years apart. And we're putting together 5-year plans for the state so they can see what kind of work we want to do on these levees. Well, I compared the two surveys, and the levees where you're going to build these intakes, our project levees are built mostly on sand, and so they have not had a history like some of the central delta of having very weak foundations and a lot of movement. But lo and behold, we've got levees around Cortland and certainly that downstream most intake, where if you look at the data of the top of the levee between 2007 and 2017, it's gone down. In some areas, it's gone down over a foot in 10 years. And specifically where your pumping plant's going to be, it's gone down over half a foot. And so that's one of those things you're not going to be able to figure out why it's happening just by punching a few holes. You just got to have to see it happen and understand that odd things happen out there in the Delta. So I can't, encourage you enough to listen to what I have to say and what some of the landowners, because a lot of my engineering background actually comes from landowners. I have to take this textbook engineering that I've had for years and then apply it to what they know. And they don't understand that what they know is actually engineering. And I try to then realize, okay, that's why this happened on that levee and that levee. And so it's kind of a merging of all the experience they have through many generations, what they've seen and heard throughout the ages, and then what I know and what I've seen in the last 36 years I've worked in. So I want to close with that just remember that things don't happen as easily as you think out there. And the response can't be, well, we'll figure that out in design, because there are things going to happen after design that you're really not going to understand. And I can't really explain it too much because you won't really understand until you see it. So that's all I have. And like I said, the first two speakers, I wanted them to go first because there's a lot of passion. I've got a lot of passion. I love what I do. I hope that my staff, as I move on over the next few years, kind of gain that kind of love, because it is something different. You don't ever have a job where you can go out and be in the area like Sean and Anna described. And it's just amazing. Go out there and kind of be out in the middle of nowhere. I remember we had a receptionist a few years ago who wanted to see what I did. And so I took her down to an island to show her. And lo and behold, the farmer was growing market tomatoes. And market tomatoes are picked green. They call them green tomatoes. And so some of these were left on the vine because they were turning red. And so she got to pick all these gigantic tomatoes. And we were out in the middle of nowhere, yet a mile behind us was I-5. And there's no way you'd ever figure that out, because once you get off I-5, off the beaten path, you are in just amazing area. Wildlife, farming. I've got this virtual meeting fatigue. So you might notice I'm in my backyard today. I'm getting tired of seeing myself on the screen with bookcases or shelves or walls. And so I'm out here now and just sitting out here in this meeting out in nature, just in my backyard is very fulfilling. So thank you again for the opportunity. I'll try to supply the DCA with as much information as I can, but sometimes it does get frustrating because it is a little bit contrary to what I think might happen. So hopefully we'll get those out on the table and you can kind of figure out how things go. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert. Any questions? Any questions of any of our committee members? Well, Ms. Anna Swenson, Mr. Sean Worth, and Mr. Gilbert Cosillo, thank you all very much for continuing to participate. As you know, we treasure your points of view. your suggestions, and most importantly, your commitment to the community. Please stay engaged. We want you to help us make this the best project possible.
Oh,
Welcome.
change my mind, Tony. I do have something to say.
Yes, absolutely.
It's
I
not
was going to call the chair of the committee, and then I believe the vice chair should be here by now. We had a meeting earlier, so that might have taken long. But go ahead, Sarah.
Okay. I just want to thank you. I realize the, as you said, the passion of all of you. And, you know, sometimes it's difficult to hear because, you know, I feel that, you know, I'm part of this project that I do want to see go forward. But then I hear, and I've been out on the Delta myself, both bicycling and kayaking and all that kind of thing. But, you know, obviously I don't live there. So I don't have that kind of really perspective. So listening to you is what's really important. I am intrigued with Mr. Worth's proposal about changing one of the intakes. I mean, that's the sort of thing that, you know, hopefully we can look at things like this. And but seriously, thank you so much to the three of you for coming to us and expressing your very deep felt and well thought out feelings about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Is the committee vice chair Keegan present?
Yes, I'm here.
Good.
Thank you for recognizing me, President Estremera. You know, I would also like to thank today's participants. The passion and their caring for their community really came through. And for any of us who spent time in the Delta, we can all agree that it's a very special place. I would like to thank Catherine Mallon, though, for really pushing for the SEC and also for coming up with the idea of having representatives come to the DCA meeting so that they can share their experience with all of you, because I think they have an important story to tell. And I think hearing it firsthand is very helpful. So thank you, Catherine, for making that happen.
Thank you, Barbara.
Can I add a short bit?
Yes,
I too want to thank the three presenters today. Very, very passionate. I am very much looking forward to post-COVID being able to go visit the community and learn a new language, evidently called farmer speak.
Yeah. Good. I'm happy to join you too. Richard?
Yeah, I want to echo everybody else's comments. I think it's always really appreciate the historical context and obviously their very firm, passionate commitments to wanting to have the Delta be a special place, which we all agree with. And we look forward to working with them in the future.
Great. Well, thanks again to all the committee members and of course to our committee chair and committee vice chair. Thank you all for your help and assistance with this fantastic project. We've got a lot to do and we really need the input. We appreciate it. So thanks again for joining us and we'll see you at the committee meeting. Thank you. Okay, we'll move right along then to the independent technical review of intakes, which is G.
You've met Phil Ryan. He's done a presentation before the DCA. He leads the intakes group in addition to being the design manager for the DCA. So I was going to have him give you an update on the intakes independent technical review session that was just held a few months ago.
Great. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay. Thank you for having me back. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the board and the members of the public present. Why don't we just move on to the first slide, Claudia? Well, next one down anyway. Okay, so we conducted an independent technical review in March regarding the intakes. So I just wanted to first remind everyone the specific purpose of these independent technical reviews and sort of tailor it to the one we had for the intakes. So this is an opportunity for industry experts to provide us, their independent review and suggest ideas for consideration regarding the project that we illustrate for them. This allows the sharing of opinions from these experts, drawing on their wide range of regional, national, global. Those are all geographic experiences, but also their particular frame of reference from their experience, be it O&M or design or biology or those kinds of things. These ITR sessions typically are in the 3 to 5 day range, and they focus on a specific set of goals and objectives. The intakes ITR was a 3-day review. And that's one thing I'd like to emphasize is these experts come in, they have a lot of great ideas, but remember, they're only spending 3 days. They don't have the opportunity to spend the time that, people like me and others spend evaluating these particular facilities for months and years. So they do what they can in the 3 days, and they give us that's the idea, is to get their ideas out, and then we flush through their ideas. And the whole independent technical review concept is a best practice in capital delivery programs pretty much throughout the world for improving quality and making sure that ideas don't go unnoticed throughout the project. So this one was no exception. So go ahead, Claudia. Our panel members, you can see them here. I'm not sure all of their names are particularly important to people who don't know them, but we had Mr. Bittner, who was a marine construction contractor, so brought the perspective of working in the water, which is obviously key for the construction of the intakes. Brent Mefford is an ex-agency member who spent a lot of time in working with fish greens throughout the Western United States. I believe he's retired USBR. So he brought a perspective of lots of different projects. Dr. Hansen is a pretty well-known fisheries biologist working in a lot in Central California. So he's got a very focused perspective on particularly what we're doing. He's been around even some of the intakes I've worked on for decades, so quite a bit of experience. Dennis Duratzog is a retired consulting engineer working in intake design. Again, I've been around projects. I've never met Dennis directly, but we've conversed on the phone and been involved in several projects together. I was hoping to get the opportunity here, but in COVID, we did it by the same way we're doing this meeting. We got to interact that way. He brings a lot of design experience from a variety of intakes. So he represents kind of the whole gamut of engineering, planning, and his interaction with biologists over the years. Mark Nunnally is a O&M manager for PG&E on some of their larger intakes, particularly one up on the Stanislaus River, which has similar facilities. Brought an interesting perspective to the use of both T and vertical plate screens. And then Ray Costa is a geotechnical engineer who the intakes obviously have a lot of embankment work, levee, flood control type thing. So he brought that perspective to considering the intakes. Now, a lot of the levee work is a little premature for this first intakes ITR, but we wanted to keep the group well-rounded from the get-go. So anyway, those are the panel members that got together and they spent the 3 days. Next one, please, Claudia. So their main scope, we asked them to look at the 6 items here, minimize the intake footprints. What were their ideas for that? We went through construction sequencing and asked them to comment on how they saw that, if there's anything they thought could be done different or better. We particularly were after input on the cofferdam and deep foundation, constructability, alternative methods, that kind of thing. Obviously, with our O&M representative from PG&E, one of the main things we were interested in is if they had any operations and hydraulic control comments on the, we presented how we were proposing to do it and get their input on that. Sediment management is a major issue on all these intakes, so we're always interested in anybody's ideas and experience on that. And then one very specific thing, because it relates directly to the size of the intakes in the river, was their comment on where we thought we should cut off the maximum height of the vertical flat plate panels, because there's a trade-off in height between the ability to effectively clean and manage them and that height. So we talked to them about that. Okay. So in the end, we got back these several dozen comments. You can see that we got some comments focused on virtually everything we asked for. And as is typical in ITRs, they usually wander out and opine about a few other things, based on their experience and that kind of thing, to give us suggestions and ideas about moving forward. So rather than go through all these, because some of them get into a fair amount of minutia, we picked the 5 key items that came up. Some of them, a couple of them are sort of a group of ideas that we focused on, and I'll present our evaluation of those here in the next few slides. So go ahead, Claudia. So the first item, you can see there's numbers behind them. This actually doesn't come first. It came close to last in their presentation in their report. But this was an important one because it does frame something we've been talking. We asked them to comment about minimizing footprint, and they jumped on the idea. We introduced the concept. They were looking at T-screens. We've also shared this kind of information with the SEC. So we described the difference with T and vertical plate screens, and they basically concurred that they offer the potential benefits to construction and operation of the intakes as compared to the flat panel. They can be condensed into shorter structures, and then that screen footprint could be important in reducing environmental impacts and improving operations of the screen. So our response to this one is we absolutely agree. The T-screen design can reduce the overall length of the intake structures. Depending on the site we're looking at, the T's themselves take us 20 to 40% in shorter screens compared to the flat panels. They can be, and the proof is out there in where they're used, that they can be cleaned more efficiently, which reduces the frequency that they need to be, manually maintained. And they also improve the approach velocity performance. So again, this just agrees with our concept to continue. We are evaluating the T-screens and the vertical plates with the DCO and the various agencies, and we're still moving this particular aspect of the project forward. Next one, please. So another idea, they jumped all over the T-screening option. I thought, well, maybe we can do something to reduce them even further, was to take a few smaller screens and stack them on top of each other instead of just a single screen. So the potential benefits where you could use slightly smaller ones, get more area out of, say, 2 smaller ones, and then the smaller they are in diameter, the smaller they are in length too. So further reduce the structure, potentially an additional 10 to 20%. And then they also looked at if you put them on a slope, which we'll talk about here in a minute, you could actually use even larger ones and maybe reduce the footprint even further. Unfortunately, we had to disagree with this particular response, and it's both an engineering sort of O&M perspective and a biological perspective, in that when you start stacking the screens, they start to take up almost all of the entire available water column, thereby fish trying to pass the structure really have a lot less opportunity to go over or under them. They're around them and between them, and there's a lot more places for predators to hide and the whole thing. And plus the O&M for these gets much more difficult. if you can see the way they're stacked in the picture here, you can bring them up to the top, dog them off on the top. And the large ones, you can actually walk right inside and work on them for O&M. And in the case of these stacked ones, you literally have to remove one in order to get to the one below it. So we have decided to disagree with this particular one for those reasons. Next, please. So here's back to what I was talking before, is you put the screens on an incline. Now this would give you the opportunity then to have the full slope rather than a vertical wall available for fish to move around the screen. So that's kind of a biological advantage to that. However, there's a lot of disadvantages associated with operations and constructability that may, offset those advantages. They're a lot harder to maintain because they're a lot harder to pull up the screens on that slope. And then the constructability of these things is highly questionable because they're in the river. Like the picture shown here, they're able to construct them in the dry. We wouldn't have that option. And to be honest with you, most of our facility would be underwater. And the size of the cofferdam required to put this thing on the big slope for the river would be very difficult. So we've acknowledged this idea and are intending to continue to evaluate it with the agencies. So we have not ruled it out and will continue to consider it. But there are, the trade-off in advantages and disadvantages. So this one is going to be continued to be looked at as time goes forward. Next, please. The team focused a lot on some off-site prefabrication. So to consider constructing the intake from prefabricated concrete elements and set them in place from the river using barge systems rather than building it from the land side. Obviously, the team felt like it would eliminate cofferdam construction and reduce some of the schedule risk and could reduce some of the land side construction congestions at the intake sites. I want to kind of start off in a response. This concept has been considered for these intakes repeatedly. I've been working on the project since around 2010, and this is like the third time it's come up, and we keep running into the same issue. It's very difficult, if not impossible, for large elements to fabricate them, say, downstream in the East Bay area and get them up the river. The river doesn't have enough draft available for very heavy options. Now you can clearly bring lighter loaded barges up. It's done fairly frequently, and we actually plan to do that for some of the riprap placement and other things in front of the intakes. But the large elements that would actually help us, achieve a better project with less impacts, you really can't do that and get them up the river. So they also commented about, well, maybe we could just build them in a different facility up in the North Delta and move those down and place them at the intakes. Well, the reality is that would entail essentially the same impacts with the same limits for aquatic species. There's not really a lot of places nearby with adequate depth to do that. So really, you have to build the cofferdam one way or the other because we only get a 4-month window in the summer season to be able to be exposed to the river. So I think the team didn't completely understand the limitations and the potential impacts associated with the facilities required to build these things and move them into place by barge. And it's really generally impractical. And I mean, we appreciate that it comes up. Everybody seems to think about it because it seems like a good idea, but we disagree with this particular idea. Okay. So the last one is less of an idea and more of a description of concept and the team's ideas that two-dimensional river modeling would provide valuable data to aid in final design of the intakes. And we wholeheartedly agree. Before I even get into the benefits, this is something that not only just in the final design of the intakes, we agree that it could be useful even in some of the planning we're currently doing. So the 2D models is a benefit. They do provide valuable predictions of flow and velocity distributions, and flood control people look at this, about erosion potential in places you need to armor the banks. We also will look at it for the fine tuning of the position of the intakes at the sites to minimize those kinds of things. Fisheries folks look at them to see the kinds of impacts it may have on aquatic species and things we may be able to do along the face of the structures. And, as far as flood management goes, it's actually required by the Central Valley Flood Protection Board and the Army Corps of Engineers in the flood impacts analysis that will go along with permitting the project. And, in the planning phase, the use of this can inform the hydraulic impacts aspects of the selection between the T and vertical plate screens. So I think this is important to point out that we wholeheartedly agree, and quite frankly, it's in our budget next year to begin some of this modeling work to support the DCO as part of the environmental analysis. So I think that's the last one I had, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions?
I'd like to make just one comment, general comment about these ITRs, and Anna touched on it in her presentation a little bit. These ITR sessions where we bring experts together, we encourage an open dialogue and brainstorming, and certainly they're bringing a lot of their experience to the table. They're not intended to be definitive comments, but rather ideas for our consideration. And I think you saw here with Phil's presentation that it's not uncommon for experts to have different opinions and to bat ideas around, which is always healthy for any project. So just as we had a comment with the tunneling independent technical review committee about the use of the RTM, which we disagreed with, certainly ideas that have come out of these that we agree with that are leading to benefits in the program. So I think what Phil went through is a perfect example of how we seriously consider all of these ideas and are always looking for ways of optimizing the design of the facilities and the benefit of the program.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Phil. We'll move right along then to
Tony?
Yes.
We actually just got a request for public comment on this item,
Oh, okay, sure.
and that's Anna Swenson.
Oh, hi, Anna.
Hi again. So
Yes.
the point that I wanted to make is that one, I'm disappointed that we are consulting with PG&E. PG&E has consistently shown that they have a lot of work to do between San Bruno and the Paradise Fire and the Atlas Fire and the different fires. So I would thoroughly encourage you guys to pick a different pool of experts besides PG&E. I think that it hurts your credibility, especially now. They're actually in court today and yesterday. And so for the murder of all of those people in Paradise. And the other thing is that I don't see local engineers or local firms that really have, just as Gil described, generations of knowledge underneath their belt. It seems like a fool's errand to go out to these different experts that aren't really experts in the area by which you're working. So I just want to encourage you guys in all of these instances to please try to select people who are the experts. And the Delta is a very specialized area, and we need to be able to rely on those experts. There's a reason why Gil has the amount of knowledge and history. And when Gil makes a suggestion, we all sit up and pay attention because he has very definitely earned that. And so I just really want to encourage you guys to move away from this generalization of experts and really dial in on the Delta experts. And please don't encourage PG&E. PG&E burned down both of my parents' houses within a year. Please don't, please. That doesn't give you credibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Catherine, you got any response? How much do we like PG&E?
I'm not supposed to respond to comment like that.
Well, no, these are comments related to the report. So
I think Phil is more familiar with the folks on the committee than I am. I don't think there's anyone more familiar with intakes on the Sacramento River than Phil himself, having designed a few. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll move right along then to the General Counsel's report.
Thanks, President Estremera. So my report is in your packet. I just wanted to highlight two things. The first is, as noted, the JEPA amendment, which the board approved last month, has been executed by DWR and approved by the Department of General Services, so it is in effect. And as you know, that amendment allowed us to adopt the travel policy earlier on the agenda. The second item is actually not on the not in the report. It is an update on COVID. As you may have seen, the governor today issued a statewide recommendation, or actually requirement, to use face masks. Our initial review is that the current DCA reopening plan is consistent with that governor guidance, but we will follow up and make sure and adjust if as necessary. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? We'll move right along to the Treasurer's report. Donald?
So we have a report attached. I hope you all have it now.
Yes.
As of May 1, 2020, we had a little over $978,000 in our beginning balance. After several payments and receipts, we ended up at the end of the month of $796,714. But subsequent to that, around June 10, we received other dollars from DCO, made payments, and as of that date, we only had about $716 and $87. And so
Katana, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could you please face a little closer to your microphone, because every time you turn your head, you cut out.
Yeah, go ahead now.
Sorry. So I was just ending by saying at the end of the June 10, we have about $716,087 in the fund. And one more item, I just want to alert you that I realized that we should have been bringing to you our investment policy this month, but I did not realize it in time to be able to put it in the packet. So we are working on just revising a very few items and sort of align with the state code. So I will bring the investment policy with the key updates, just really minor, for your consideration in July. And I'll take any question you might have at this moment.
Thank you, Katana. Any questions?
Tony, if there aren't any questions, OSHA Meserve wanted to comment on this particular item.
Okay, good afternoon, Ms. Meserve.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the comment I wanted to make, and it relates some with the adoption of the budget and some with the report just given. And I reviewed the budget materials, and my concern is that last year DWR provided temporary funding to the JPA, and correspondence from the legislature to DWR that the JPA was copied on indicated that there may be legal problems with doing that under the applicable laws governing the state water project. And recently a letter was sent from some of the state water project contractors to the governor and others regarding a concern about advancing those funds again, which they disagreed with having those funds advanced by DWR and being obligated to pay for the work that JPA is doing when they don't want to participate in the tunnel project. So I wasn't clear from the materials in your package of, well, whether that is planned again for the 2021 budget cycle again from DWR needing to advance funds, what was phrased as temporary funding, and which DWR claimed was not a loan. So there's some confusion about that issue, and I guess I would just say maybe at the next meeting, or if there's an answer today. I think my specific question is, is that part of the plan for the next fiscal year, which is, just starting next month? And I think if so, then I think that there should be clarity about that in the materials presented to the public.
Catherine?
Or Josh?
I think we can address that at the next meeting.
Sure, that's fine. I just wanted to know. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, we'll do that. So anything else, Claudia?
No, Tony.
Okay, we'll move right along then to the DWR Environmental Management Report. And so Carrie.
Now, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, Carolyn.
Excellent. Thank you, President Estremera. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties today. So a few updates today. One of them is that we are still working on our scoping summary report. So scoping closed on April 17th, and we are working to compile the comments received, a summary of those comments, as well as a description of the scoping process, and that will be in the scoping summary report that we expect to release next month. We have also been working to initiate NEPA, and I think we've talked about this before, that for this effort, we do not have a federal project proponent. So that means that one of the regulatory agencies will be the NEPA lead. So in order to figure out the NEPA lead, we need to formally engage the Corps to allow the federal agencies to determine the NEPA lead. So the Corps identified 2 steps that we need to take to formally engage them. On the flood side, we needed a statement of no objection letter from the Central Valley Flood Protection Board to initiate the Section 408 permitting process. And we did receive that letter from the Flood Board. And the second was that we needed to submit a 404 application to initiate the process on the regulatory side. So we submitted that 404 application this week. We posted it on our website today with some questions and answers to help people understand what it is. So it is, we think there are probably a number of questions because often the 404 permit doesn't come until later in the process, and the permit decision this time, again, will not come until much later in the process. We submitted it now to help initiate this NEPA process, but there will be no decision until after CEQA, NEPA, and other permitting efforts are complete. The other thing we wanted to mention is that it only includes one alignment. So DWR's notice of preparation included 2 corridors for the proposed project, but for the purposes of an application for 404, we were only able to include 1 in the application. We want to be really clear that that doesn't constitute a decision from us. We were specific about that in our cover letter to the Corps. This is not a decision about the project that we want to implement. We won't make a decision until after CEQA is complete, where we will be analyzing alternatives. And similarly, that needs to be done on the NEPA side. We need to look at a range of alternatives before any decisions can be made about the project to implement. So the 404 application is submitted to the Corps. That will eventually initiate a NEPA process. So I should have more information about that next month. The final update is I did want to mention that we are still working on the environmental process for the soil investigations. So we are continuing to work on the environmental compliance, and depending on when it's completed, we are planning to proceed with some investigations this summer. I think those are my updates, if there are any questions.
Yes, Sarah.
I have one. Since I know it doesn't nail you down in terms of what your preference for for alignment is, but can you tell us what alignment you used in your application process?
So we did use the eastern alignment that is closer to I-5, and the notice of preparation also included 3 intakes, and we only could include 2 because that would be another alignment as well. So we included intakes 3 and 5 and the eastern alignment. But again, that is not a decision.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? Steve, Richard?
No.
No, I'm good. Thanks for the report, Kerry.
Yes, Steve. Any public comment?
Not at this time, Director Estamera.
Great. Well, thank you, Carolyn, for the report. We'll move right along then to verbal reports. Are there any? Okay, seeing none. Future agenda items? Okay, at this time, we're ready to adjourn. Next scheduled meeting, July 16th at 2 p.m. Same time, same station, same place. So thank all of you, especially to the committee members, committee chair, committee vice chair, to Catherine, your staff, our general counsel, and of course to my colleagues on the board. Thank you all. Be safe, take care, and we'll see you at our next meeting.
Yeah, you too.